Welcome, welcome to the Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu. Here we discuss how to develop the nuanced hard skills, meaning the most challenging soft skills needed to make a real impact through your leadership. I'm your host, Dr. Mira Brancu. I'm a leadership consulting and coaching psychologist, founder of Towerscope Leadership Academy, and an associate professor, a Psychology Today columnist, and author of The Millennial's Guide to Workplace Politics. And I had my own leadership career before transitioning to helping teams and high achieving women navigate their leadership complexities. So thank you for joining us today. Now, on to the focus of our episode today. We often talk about people and processes on the show, but in today's world, technology has added an additional layer of complexity that requires its thoughtful integration into the strategies connecting people and processes. We haven't talked about much on it on this show, but we really do need to think about it thoughtfully. And we need to think about things like, how do we integrate technology in a way that doesn't add chaos and still supports effectiveness and efficiency? And that's what we'll be delving into today with Dr. Ernest Wayde. It's a great topic for for this season, which is focused on navigating complexity. Before I introduce you to this super awesome person, I do want to remind people that applications are now open through July 19th for the fall 2024 cohort of Towerscope Leadership Academy. This academy focuses on building a community of high-achieving, growth-minded leaders looking to expertly navigate today's complex workplace dynamics within disrupted industries and make a greater impact. So who is right for this? If you're experiencing a tension between your personal expectations, your organizational culture, values, and factors, your personal values and authenticity, this community might be right for you. And if you're feeling blindsided by workplace politics, a desire to be more strategic and less tactical, a desire to feel more effective in your leadership journey, and maybe even ambivalent or concerned about your leadership trajectory, this is the time to take a reflective pause and consider that maybe a structured, supportive leadership learning community might support your next steps. So, how do you apply? Well, first of all, we are having an open house on July 15th to learn more and connect with current members. You can ask them privately anything that you want to ask and learn about the community to see if it's a good fit. If you're interested in that or directly applying, you go to gotowerscope.com and click on Leadership Academy and you'll find out everything about it. Okay, with no further ado, I'm excited to introduce our special guest today, Dr. Ernest Wayde. Dr. Wayde is the founder and CEO of Wayde Consulting, where he focuses on the development and integration of people, processes, and technology into business strategy for business growth and success. With over 20 years of combined experience in the private and public sectors, Ernest has a diverse and extensive background in people and technology management, from his time working with leaders in the healthcare and technology industries and beyond. So, are you ready? Let's get started. Get your pens out and paper. If you're a pen and paper kind of person, I am. Or take your devices out if you like the technology piece. Reflect deeply, identify at least one small step to further your hard skills muscle today. Welcome and great to have you on the show, Ernest.
Mira, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, you have had a fascinating life and career. So I think that's where I want to get started. First of all, we met through several different ways. We met through the Department of Veterans Affairs, where you did a lot of work in health technology spaces. We also met through the Society of Consulting Psychology and the Society of Psychologists in Leadership and all of this stuff. But I think your interest in technology and business and psychology started well before this. So I would love for you to share a little bit about your background, your global experiences, your travels to get you to this point today.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I think one of the things about me that I am really fortunate to have had is various experiences. And I've lived in a lot of different countries because my mom used to work with the UN. So we travel around a lot and I got to experience a lot of different cultures. But my love for technology came as far back as I can remember, I've always enjoyed computers. I've always enjoyed tinkering with computers. And so, I meant to go to college for computer science. And I remember thinking very clearly at the time when AI was coming out, and it wasn't really such a big thing, but I really had a passion for working with AI. And I thought to myself, if I'm going to build a machine that can think like a human, I need to understand how humans think and behave. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll just do computer science and psychology. And so from a very early age, I really meant to blend those things, and it's turned out that I've been very fortunate in that I've been able to get training and experiences in both computers and in psychology, and have been able to blend those as I've moved along. So I started off my career actually in the computer science industry, in the technology industry. I did a lot of things, including programming, project management, and ended up doing client relations, which required me to be in a leadership position. And I quickly realized that I was a terrible leader because I didn't know anything about leadership. No one ever taught me to be a leader. And so it turned out that was a good time for me to go back and get my graduate degrees in psychology. And so I did that and ended up doing some organizational work. Loved doing that. And that's when you and I met at NCOD when I was doing some organizational and leadership work there. And then shortly after that, I got an opportunity to work still in the VA, but work with the electronic health record modernization efforts. And so got back to working with technology, working with data and analytics and data management. I did that for a while before I started my own company. And now I get to blend all the things that I enjoy. I get to work with people, help them to understand their processes, and help them to integrate technology to help them be successful.
So interesting. Now, you mentioned NCOD. For those who don't know, that is the National Center for Organizational Development in the VA. It is probably the best kept secret. It's a small entity serving a very large, vast number of leaders across the system. And then Ernest, you went from that, so having this sort of like added organizational development knowledge on top of your clinical psychology experience, on top of your computer science, and you started blending it together when you looked at the modernization of electronic health records. What does it take? What were you doing when you were combining those skill sets to try to modernize a large healthcare system electronic record management? I
Yeah,
can't even imagine, but what does it take? How do you combine those experiences to make that happen?
I think actually doing that was one of the first times when I got to blend all of my different skills and experiences, because I was working with technology, I was working with computers and working with software, and really working with cutting edge things. I mean, some of the applications we had AI in them, and so that was really exciting for me. But on the other hand, I had to work with people as well who were not so excited about the new technology,
Mm.
and not so excited about the effort and the work that would be required for them to learn this new system. And so that's where a lot of my training and change management came into play, really helping people understand the new technology, which I was able to do because I had that experience. And so I was able to bridge the gap between the users who are going to be the end users of the technology, and the developers and implementers who are creating the technology. And because I can speak both their languages. And so it's really very helpful for me to be able to understand what the users were concerned about, what they really needed to use the technology for, and also understand from the computer science perspective, the technology perspective, what the technology was supposed to do and what they needed in order to make sure that they successfully implemented the system. And so I think one of the things that we've come to learn is a successful implementation is not just when the system is in and when you turn it on and it's ready to go. That's not the end all, right? It's really successful when the people who are meant to be using the system understand it and are using it efficiently and effectively. That's what we call a successful implementation.
Yeah, absolutely. It is such an underrated piece of the change process.
Mhm.
Um, what is what are the most common worries, concerns, fears that people have when you say, "Hey, we've got a new technology. Isn't this exciting? Let's try it out." Like, why are people so resistant? What are the sort of barriers that you've seen?
Yeah, if you think about this in terms of just your everyday activities, when you are doing something and you are using technology, even if you're not, you're used to it. Even if you don't like it that much, you know how to do it. You're very familiar with it. You get a level of comfort with it. And then someone says, hey, we're going to introduce something completely new that you don't know how to do, that you don't know how to use. There's a natural resistance to that because it requires you to put in more effort to learn something new. And for the most part, a lot of people, we just generally don't like to learn new things if it's going to require more effort from us and make us less efficient, right? Because when you're learning something new, you're going to be less efficient than you are using a system that you've been using. So there is that natural resistance to change just because we're comfortable in using what we have. We know how to use it, it's familiar to us, and we're efficient. We're good at it. No one wants to get to do something and be bad at it, which is what happens when you're learning something new. You're not that great at it, and nobody likes to be in that place. So I think very often when you introduce something new, resistance, which is absolutely natural and is a natural biological thing that people do, is what people experience at first. And if you're not very careful, you assume that people are resistant just because they don't want to engage in this new system or they don't want to use the system. But it really, if you start to dig deeper, you can understand that no, they have some really good reasons as to why they don't want to put in the effort to learn something new at this time.
Yeah, absolutely. So, given that, what do leaders need to know as they're getting all excited about a brand new, like implementing any brand new technological process?
Mhm.
To them, sometimes it's very obvious. Like it makes sense. It's obvious that we need to implement this. This is why, this is the case for it, right? What is it that they're missing that they need to know about the people part of this?
Yeah. So I've got a great example of this actually with a client that I was working with recently. So they were introducing a new system to their organization, but when they had heard about this new system, because they were middle management, and when their bosses introduced this new system to them, they absolutely hated the idea. Just like anybody else, they were naturally resistant to it. But then they had had time, months, to get used to the idea, to understand the benefits of the idea, and so when they actually were introducing the new system to their employees and their staff, they were excited. They were excited because they had the opportunity to understand the benefits of the system. But they were immediately surprised when their employees were resistant, which is exactly the feeling that they had had in the beginning. And I think that's so critical. As a
Yeah.
leader, you need to understand just as you are initially resistant to something, your employees are also going to be resistant. And just as it took you time and effort and energy to get over it and to move forward, it's going to take them time and energy to move forward. And there's things that you can do to help them do that, but resistance is a natural and a normal part of change. And so I think that's something that leaders need to understand and prepare for.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I often try to share with leaders is resistance is not always going to look like, no, I don't want to do it, right?
Mhm.
Because a lot of people aren't going to just tell their boss, no, I'm not going to do it, right? So resistance looks like lots of questions and picking apart your ideas.
Mhm.
Resistance might look like um, getting very slow to move and then telling you there's a lot of barriers and then trying to backtrack or trying to undermine and sabotage the process or tell you that it's not working or whatever. And some of that actually might be true that it isn't working because of something that you're missing, and some of it might just be how people actually deal with anxiety, which is nobody's going to say, I'm anxious and I'm uncomfortable with change and
Yeah.
I don't want to do this. They don't say that. They don't do that. It just shows up differently. So we're entering an ad break. When we come back, let's talk about this interesting piece of what resistance actually looks like. What should leaders be looking for? And then how to empathize and navigate this to help employees more quickly uptake. So
Mhm.
you're listening to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest today, Dr. Ernest Wayde. We air on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Eastern. If you're here right now live with us, you can ask questions online on LinkedIn or YouTube at talkradio.nyc, and we can answer them in real time. We'll be right back in just a moment with our guest.
Are you a conscious co creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, host of The Hard Skills on talkradio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Welcome back to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest today, Dr. Ernest Wayde, who is a technophile, who's obviously also somebody fantastic at psychology and business and combining those three. Now, I am not a technophile. I'm married to one. So, technophile, somebody who's enthusiastic about technology and tech savvy. My first cell phone was given to me, bought for me by my husband, who had to explain to me how to work this thing. And then my first laptop, my first more recent computer, which was an Apple, bought by my husband, explained to me how to use this newfangled Apple thing. And despite my resistance, despite my sort of kind of ornery, like, why do I need to do this? There's no, all of that stuff, he helped. And the reason is that he was able to empathize and make it easier for me to uptake, right? And that's what it takes. Like it requires you caring about the experience of the other person and empathizing with how hard it might be or what it is that they don't like about it, right? And so what, from your perspective, do leaders need to do to empathize with a large organization of employees who are all over the place in terms of how they feel about technology? What are the sort of ways to reduce the resistance and maybe accelerate the process? What have you seen has worked or not worked?
Yeah, those are great questions. Before I answer those, I just want to say that I totally understand what your husband is going through, because my wife is exactly the same way. She can't even use the remote. My 3-year-old can use the remote, but she can't even use the remote.
Oh, yeah. No, thanks. Remote, you can use it. Go change the channel for me.
But it's very simple when we talk about what leaders need to understand when it comes to their employees and change. It's just basically, when we talk about empathy, it's really talking about the experience yourself, right? And we have all, to some degree, in some shape or form, have been resistant to some change, right? And so if you can think back to that experience, that gives you a clue, an indication of what your employees are feeling. It's the similar things as you're feeling, they're probably feeling that as well. And so I think that's where the empathy starts. When we're talking about a large organization, honestly, it's very challenging for a leader to manage the change journey of every single person, right? And so you really need a change team that can be dedicated to doing that work. I think that's one of the things that leaders need to understand is change is a critical part of any organization's journey, and you need to have the resources, the skills, the experience, the training to be able to properly address that. It's not enough for the leader just to say, I empathize with you going through this change and then step back. You need to have resources available to help the individuals that are going through that change journey to make sure that they are supported so that they can come through at the end as best as possible.
Interesting. So who is part of a change team? Are they like a permanent positions? Are they pulled from different places? Like, how do you develop a change team, and who is on that change team, and what do they
Yeah,
do?
that's a great question. It depends on the size of the organization. I think for most organizations, they don't have a dedicated change team. And so what happens is you stand one up. You stand up a project team that is going to help manage the change process. You want to make sure the people that you pull from have experience and training and change management so that they can help you, the leader, who is probably one of the most important people who is part of the change team, give you advice and give you suggestions and give you support. Because the leader, honestly, is the person who has the most to say in terms of the success or failure of any change. You're the big kahuna, you're the boss. You're the one who's able to assign resources. You're the one who's able to tell people what to do. And so if the leader is not engaged, the change is probably not going to be successful. So what typically happens in small to mid-sized organizations is that they will pull from people that have experience and stand up the change team and make sure that that includes people who are impacted by the change as well. You don't want to have a department that is not impacted by the change at all, trying to shepherd people through the change. You want to make sure that you have influential people in the department, in the organization, in the group that is going to be experiencing the change, who can actually speak to the importance of the change, the why of the change, and the how of the change. And so typically that's what happens is they pull together this group of people who have different roles within the change team to make sure that it's well represented, and then those individuals can go out into the organization, into the groups, into their teams to make sure that they are communicating to those people the why of the change, the how of the change, but also taking feedback from that group and giving it back to the leadership and the team so they can make the adjustments.
That's really interesting, and it's not something that you hear a lot of. Most of the time, you hear that the CEO has a vision, or the CEO and the C-suite folks develop a vision. And then the next in line, let's say senior VPs or senior leaders' responsibility is to communicate the change, that the change will happen to their employees, and therefore it will happen. And so what when you're developing a change team, how is that different? Do you still use the same roles because of their supervisory responsibilities? Do you use different roles? And I'm starting to think, like, pros and cons here. If you use the supervisors, it's going to feel more as a directive. And so would that actually be different than a change team? But then if you use like project managers who know how to enact and implement the change, will they have enough influence and power to communicate with the level of gravitas necessary? So I'm curious, like, how do you think about those things?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think when we're talking about the when you said just being very directive in terms of telling people, hey, you need to do this, and that's the bottom line. I think it's important to remember that a lot of organizations are going through change right now, and over half of change initiatives fail, like completely fail. And so if your approach is just you're doing this because I said so, my question would be, how's that going for you? Because over half of those things don't go well, right? And so when you talk about how do you make change successful, and you're talking about putting your team together, the truth is that an employee is actually going to look to their direct manager to determine, okay, what do I need to do? Because this is the person who's going to rate me in terms of my performance evaluation. And so this is the person who I need to make sure that I'm doing what they want me to do. And so even if you have you pull from different members of the organization. If they don't have direct authority over the person or the people that they're trying to direct, it's going to be challenging. So what happens is that the change team needs to work with those direct managers to help them support their team and to help them make sure that the team is getting what they need. Because if you don't have direct supervision over them and you tell them, hey, you need to make this change, they're going to say, who are you to me? Right? My boss has not told me I need to make this change. And so why should I listen to you? Even if you're part of some nice change team, I don't know you. You don't have direct supervision over me. So the change team really still needs to work with the supervisors of the individual teams to make sure that they have the support, the knowledge, the information to influence their team to do things.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. Have you ever seen or been witness to an organization that did put a change team in place, but it went wrong? And if so, what could go wrong even when you have a change team? What have you seen?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the truth is, and as I said, over half of change initiatives fail, right? And I don't mean to say that none of those have change teams. The quality of the members in the change team can be really important, right? The education, the experience of those individuals can be really important. And so the teams that are not as successful are the teams that themselves are not bought into the change. So if you have a team that is trying to help leaders, managers, employees buy into a change and make this change, but they themselves are not enthusiastic, they're not excited, they really could care less about the change and think it's going to fail and are behaving in that way. They're not advocating for the change. How likely do you think the leaders, the managers, the employees that they work with are going to buy into the change? Probably not very much. And so where I've seen this not go well is when you pick members of the team and those teams members are not enthusiastic and are not engaged. Now, having said that, some of the very best people you can have on a team are those naysayers, those people who are doubting. Once you're able to convince them and demonstrate to them the value of the change, they can be your very best supporters. They can be the best members of the team because they started off doubtful. And so they've asked the questions, they've challenged, and you've been able to bring them on side. And so they can be your very best advocates for a change team.
All right. So here's kind of the recap that I've gotten from this is change team is necessary, number one, but the roles, the official formal roles in an organization matter less than the certain characteristics that you're looking for on a change team. So among those is they're either early adopters and or early won over skeptics, and you have to have people with the expertise or experience, or at least a consultant to teach them these skills. By the way, Ernest has the expertise to be able to do this right. Otherwise, this is the kind of like recipe for disaster that often happens when you don't have those characteristics, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good summary of it. You need to make sure that you have all of those elements in your team to make sure that the team itself can be successful. The other piece here I think that is important is leadership support. If you stand up the team, but there's no executive leader or someone in a high position of authority that is advocating for supporting the team and giving them what they need to be successful, this team is not going to go anywhere.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we're reaching an ad break. When we come back, let's talk about how we start pulling all of these things together in kind of a strategy, right? This is sort of your bread and butter. Here's the strategy between the people, processes, and technology. So let's talk a little bit more about that when we come back. You're listening to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Branco, and our guest, Dr. Ernest Wayde, and we'll be right back in just a moment.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host a program, Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Were you an essential worker during the pandemic? If you needed to learn stages of epilepsy, did you depend on advocates? Did you use new innovations to cope with mental and neurological issues? Maintaining high quality of life and keeping good mental health are what we all strive for. I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each week top healthcare influencers, professionals, and innovators answer these questions and more. Stay tuned on Thursdays at 5 p.m. on talkradio.nyc, and I will continue to be frank about health with all of you.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to the Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest today, Dr. Ernest Wayde. We've been talking about how you implement a change across a system that is like a new technology. One of the questions that I have is, are there other times when we need to think about the integration of people, processes, and technology aside from new technologies that we're trying to implement across a system that are there other situations where we need to think about that integration?
Yeah, that's a really great question, Amir. I think for me, when we talk about people, process, and technology, those are the critical business elements. And so if you are going to implement any change in your organization, and when you think about it from the point of view of achieving a strategic goal, right? To achieve that goal, something's going to have to change, right? You're going to have to do something differently to achieve that goal. And so that's a change. When we're talking about achieving a strategy or engaging a strategy, that's a change. And so the very first thing I like to think about is, what is the value of achieving that goal? What is the value to the organization if we achieve the strategic goal that we have set out? And then start working through, okay, so here's the value to the organization. How is it going to benefit the people in the organization? And then how is it going to impact the people in the organization? If we're going to achieve this goal, what's going to have to change? What are specific people or groups of people going to have to do differently? So the change in order to make sure that we are successful as an organization to reach this goal that we've set out. And then you start thinking about, what is the impact to these people in terms of what are they going to have to do differently, and how are they going to feel about that? Are they going to be excited about it, or are they going to be resistant? Is it something that they know how to do, or is it something that they have to learn? And so by working through that, we've already got to the people side of it, right? We started with the strategy, and we're already looking at our people and thinking about, how are they going to feel about this? What are we going to need to do to make sure that they buy into the change and that they can successfully make the change? And then it takes us to the process. Okay, what do we have in terms of support that are going to help our people be successful? I always like to say, when something goes wrong, look first at the process that allowed that to happen before you look at the person or the people that did something wrong. Because if you have strong processes in place, it'll prevent people from doing things wrong most of the time, right? And then if you look at the process and say, okay, we have a process, someone didn't follow the process, then you can say, oh, okay, we need to work with that person, give them additional training or whatever. But if you don't have a process in place that prevents someone from doing that, then you need to make changes to your process. So when we start looking at changes already, we need to make sure that we're changing and thinking about the processes, the way in which we do things that have to change in order to make sure that our people are supported and also prevented from doing things wrong. And then I think technology to me is so important, because this day and age, you can't really get away from technology, right? And technology is there to help facilitate the work that we do. And there's so many different kinds of technology out there, but you need to be very thoughtful and mindful about what technology you're going to adopt to help you be successful. So many times I've seen where an organization gets this really great piece of technology and is really excited about it at the leadership level. The employees could care less, and they eventually end up not using that technology. And so then the organization has wasted their time and their money, and the employees are still doing things the way that they used to, which is a very manual process. So it's really important to think about technology that's available, but also how are your people going to interact and engage with that technology? And how are you going to make sure that the people who are actually going to use that technology buy into using it? How do you demonstrate to them the value of doing it this way and how it's going to save them time, energy, as opposed to how they used to do things before? So already you can see those are all the pieces that I think are really critical: the people, the process, and the technology. And if you don't address those properly, you're not going to be able to achieve the strategic goal that you set out in a timely manner.
Yeah. A couple of questions come to mind. And the first is, how do leaders know when it's the right time and the wrong time? Like maybe they're excited, maybe they feel like they need a change, but it's really the wrong time. Are there signs? Are there things aside from like we have money, we don't have money to do it?
Mhm.
What are they looking for with processes? What are they looking for with people to feel like and technology to feel like they're ready to meet like a new goal that makes some change one way or another?
Yeah, that's a great question. I get that a lot of times. And what I like to tell leaders is you need to have a strategic portfolio. And by that, I mean you need to have the list of strategies that you're trying to achieve in the timeline and the activities that are going to be required to do that. So here's an example of how you can answer this question is I worked with a client and they had 4 or 5 strategic goals, which is it's a lot. I like to limit it to 2 or 3, but they had 4 or 5 strategic goals and they just were unwilling to cut it down. And so we started going through, okay, well, let's look at the people that are going to be required to achieve this goal. And the same names kept coming up over and over and over again. And so I said, okay, given that you're looking at these 2 or 3 people that are going to be required to achieve all these goals, how do you see that they're going to have time to do all this work? And so by doing that, by looking at their available resources, they were then able to determine, okay, we have too many goals. We need to prioritize and cut down. And so that's a great way of looking to see, is it the right time? Is looking at your resources that are available, looking at the work that they already have to do. Because a lot of times when we have some additional goals, it's on top of their everyday work, right? They already are fully committed to their 40 hours, and then you're asking them to do additional work. Where are people going to find the time to do this work? And so it's really important for leaders to look internally at their resources, as well as externally to look at the different opportunities that are available. I always say a strategy is a plan and you have your plan in place, but it's also absolutely critical that you be flexible to make the necessary adjustments to the environment. I like that military term that says no plan survives first contact. You have to be willing to make the adjustments as things come your way.
That's a fantastic example. Yeah, I can picture so many clients that wanted to do all of these things all at once, no sequencing, and did not even think through like it's the same exact people doing all of this. You can't do it, right? It's impossible. So that's a really great example. What about processes? Let's talk about what processes do you find are missing when you see a conflict between the people and the technology?
Yeah, that's a great question. When there's conflict between people and technology, it's an indication that we've missed out on that middle section, which is the process. A lot of times what I see happen is people will throw technology at a problem and think, oh yeah, we'll just throw technology at it, this will solve it. But what technology actually does is it highlights the issues that you have, right? So if you have a bad process, it's going to highlight the bad process, because technology very often is meant to support and to make things easier, but it supports a process. So if you have a way of doing things and the technology comes in, it's going to highlight and actually even make even worse the way in which demonstrate even worse the way in which you're doing things, because the technology supports the process. And so I think it's really important that before you even get to the technology piece, you need to pay attention to your process, evaluate your process. There's a whole science to process management, which is really critical. When we were working at the VA, one of the things that we identified was when we were asking people to change their technology from the old EHR, electronic health record, to the new electronic health record, we were running into issues because there weren't clear processes as to how to do things. Different groups were following different processes. And so
Hmm.
we were having conflict with the technology because people had different ways of doing things. So we had to really set the technology aside and start with the process, get the groups together and identify a streamlined process before we could bring the technology to support that process.
Can you give an example of like what, well, first of all, what's process management? And second, um, what what kind of processes conflict with each other that would keep a technology from being implemented? Like one thing that I can think of just off the top of my head is the fact that a lot of organizations have implemented Microsoft Teams. Microsoft, I'm really sorry, but I'm just going to say this: it wasn't rolled out as some like easy, smooth thing. And some people picked up Teams and were like, yes, let's create channels and let's, get people talking on this thing and blah, blah, blah. And then some people, the early adopters, were like, this is great, and finally we can chat all the time. And other people like, I hate this system and I can't find anything. And where are my files? And, all those things. And I'm wondering, like, in that kind of situation, what's
Yeah.
missing? What's missing?
That's such a great example. Let's use that same example, right? So look at Teams. Teams can do so much, right? You can communicate in Teams, but how do you communicate in Teams? You can chat, right? You can email, you have SharePoint boards. There are so many ways of communicating just in Teams alone. Whiteboards, I mean, it just goes on and on, right? But if your team doesn't have a process for how they communicate and you implement Teams and you say, okay, Teams is going to solve all our communications problems. Well, person A is going to chat, and that's how they're going to communicate. Person B is going to use email. Person C is going to use the whiteboard on there. Person D is going to post something on SharePoint. So again, we haven't determined how we're going to communicate. Teams is a great tool for communicating. But if you don't determine which tool you're going to use for what type of communication, it's not going to be helpful. It's actually going to make people frustrated because why didn't you get that message I sent you? Well, did you email it to me? No, I sent it by chat. Well, I don't use chat. I use email. And so it can actually frustrate the process because you think you have this tool that's going to solve everything, and it actually highlights how bad your processes are.
Oh, such a great example. Yeah, I don't think I know of a lot of teams that think about how are we going to use this technology and in a way that sort of incorporates our personal communication preferences, our pet peeves, the way that we should be working as a team as compared to the organization, for example. Like all of these things need to be discussed in advance before you start forcing people to try things out that make no sense to them.
Yeah. I've had just as a personal example, as a leader, because as a leader, and I had multiple teams that I was in charge of. I always told everybody, I'm on Teams, I'm on the chat, and so if you need something, ping me on chat. But some people would shoot me an email and put the priority tag on it, but I'm not checking my email because I'm looking at Teams for my priority. And then other people would text me, and I would ignore my text because I'm focused on this what I'm doing. But I have my chat up, and if someone needs to get me imminently or immediately, that's how I want them to do that. And so if you're not communicating, okay, this is how you can reach me in an emergency, I'll get to the emails at the end of the day. You're not setting a clear process to how to communicate. So that's just another example of how if you have the technology, but if you don't have the processes in place and are very clear about what process is for what, the technology is not going to be helpful.
Absolutely. I mean, even think about the one way that I do have this conversation with leaders is when they're completely overwhelmed with all of the communication coming at them in all of the systems. And, I will say, have you talked with your team about a triage system? Have you talked with them about your preferences of a hierarchical, increased level of escalation depending on the need? Where, do they email you first? And then after that, do they chat you or text you? And after that, do they come to your door and knock? And after that, do they call you? Like, what is the triage method here so that you don't feel like you're answering in different ways and different, and everybody's need, right? It's you apply that to a whole system so that you have a much more systemized, calm, less chaotic process for all.
Yeah,
right?
that's a great example of a process, right? It's how do we triage? how do we elevate things so that the leader understands, okay, when you bring it to me in this way, I know that it's critical and I need to drop everything else and pay attention to it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. We are reaching our ad break, so we will be right back with Dr. Ernest Wayde in just a moment. Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Broncu, host of The Hard Skills on talkradio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Broncu, and our guest today, Dr. Ernest Wayde. He is an expert in people, processes, and technology and integrating them in through a strategy. And as we're pulling all of this together, and you're thinking about the internal clients that you've worked with when you were an internal consultant and the clients you work with now as an external consultant, what are the most sort of common challenges that you would like leaders to start attending to that would help their people, processes, and technology systems to improve, like right away?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think in terms of leaders internally and externally, one of the most important things that I think is important to is focusing on your people. You know, I say the people, process, and technology are critical elements, but the most important resource any organization has is your people. And so I think it's really important for leaders to pay attention to the people. And by that, I mean, you need to really understand what motivates your people and what demotivates your people, right? I think it's really important to understand how to communicate with your people, especially when you're trying to influence them. And that's also really very important nowadays when we're working in the virtual environment. You know, it's a lot easier to try to motivate someone if you can go to their office and talk to them face to face. It's a lot harder when it's virtual. So you really need to understand your employees, understand from a work point of view what motivates them, how they like to work, how they like to be communicated with. And it's also really important for you as a leader to share those things as well. Your employees need to understand how it's best to communicate with you, how it's best to reach you, and things like that. Also very, very critical when we're talking about this in a virtual world. In terms of, if you think about the organization as a system, and organizations are a system, right? People are that critical element that really facilitate the success of the organization. And so it's really critical to focus, on your people. So I say for all leaders, internally, externally, make sure that you're understanding your people better from the work perspective. Make sure that you're giving them the time and the attention to understand how to communicate with them, what motivates them, what challenges they have, right? To make sure that you can be as supportive as possible as a leader.
Absolutely. Listen, there's nothing more aggravating for an employee, and speaking myself as well, there's nothing more aggravating than terrible processes, you know, where you feel like you're working around 10 different systems to get your work done. And you want to know what that is, right? You want to know. I'm going to flip this around just a little bit because I've gone to several medical, healthcare appointments where I had to go through a hospital, different hospital systems, right? And I was just like constantly thinking, God, why did I have to check in 3 times? And God, why did I, have to walk here only to walk there to say the same exact thing? And
Yeah.
like, if you can somehow put yourself in the shoes of either your patients or your customers or your clients, and in this case, your employees, and understand their experience from their perspective and ask them, like, what is the most frustrating thing? What is the most demotivating thing about like work, going through your work day, and then trying to address that makes a world of a difference, right?
Yeah.
That's from my perspective.
Yeah. Absolutely. There's a term in Lean Six Sigma. It's called the Gemba walk, right? Which is basically
Yeah.
going to that site and experiencing it from the point of view, or as you're talking about, as a patient. Go walk in as a patient, see what it's like for a patient as they come in, see what it's like when they're trying to check in, see what it's like when they see the patient, and then also flip it, right? See it from the staff's point of view. What is it like being a staff member, checking people in? What is it like from a staff member, making sure that the patients have what they need? Because it's really important to make sure that when we're talking about processes, we're looking at it from the point of view of the person who has to follow the process, but also the person who's experiencing that process, who's benefiting or being harmed by that process.
Absolutely. So what are just a few simple changes that you would recommend leaders implement right away if they have identified that they can make improvements, that they've, what are just 3 simple changes that they could make like right away?
Yeah, I always like to start with self. It's my approach is start with yourself. So as a leader, look first internally, right? As I say, first look at the process before the person. If you're having some issues with leadership with your team, look at yourself first. Look at your how you lead it and ask yourself, how can I be a better leader? What can I do to make sure that I am leading appropriately? I am someone that people want to follow. And there's a whole world that comes with that, right? And so it's not a simple thing. That's a big thing to do some self-reflection, to make sure that you have self-awareness. I think self-awareness is critical, but you do self-awareness so that you can engage in self-management, right? It's not helpful just to know who you are and understand who you are. You, as a leader, you need to be able to manage how you come across. And so it's important that you understand who you are so that you can manage how you come across. So I think that's the first thing is, as a leader, is engage in some self-awareness so that you can engage in some self-management. The second thing I would say is look at your team. Look at the people that are working with you, working for you, and do your best to understand who they are as a person in the work environment. As I said, what motivates them, what demotivates them, what angers them, what they're afraid of. Because a lot of people are afraid when it comes to change management. They're afraid that they're not going to be able to learn that new system. And then they're worried that their job is at risk. Understand the people that you're working with so that you can better communicate with them, so that you can better support them. So those are the 2 that I would recommend. I'm going to stop at 2 because those are big in themselves.
That's great. Yeah.
Right? There's a lot in there.
Absolutely. Those are great. Okay. Where could people find out more about you and engaging you in helping them work through this?
Yeah, I mean, you can find me on LinkedIn, and I also have my website, wadeconsulting.com, and there's a lot of information on there. And I also have my podcast, Psych in Business, where people can listen to, leaders and consultants like yourself talk about the great work that they do and how it helps leaders and organizations be more successful. So, yeah, I'm available in all of those mediums.
Excellent. And for those of you who might be watching, let's see, I'm going to share my screen just so that you can also see the website. And those of you who are not watching right now or the recording, go to the website, okay? Wayde Consulting, Wayde consulting.com. It's a beautiful website. Do check it out. And then the Psych in Business, PSYCH, Psych in Business is his podcast. I was on his podcast before, so look that up as well. We did have a fun episode on his podcast as well. Yeah. Okay, audience, what did you take away from today? And more importantly, what is one small change that you can implement this week based on what you learned from Ernest? Share it with us on LinkedIn. He just mentioned he's on LinkedIn. So am I. That's where we live online. So you can find us there, Ernest Wayde or Mira Brancu on LinkedIn. You could also find talkradio.nyc and share with us what you learned so that we can cheer you on. Talkradio.nyc is also on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, all over the place. So you can find them there as well. In addition to being a live show, we're also on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and Amazon and all over the place. So check us out. Make sure that you subscribe if you go to Apple Podcasts, leave a review, and share with others to help us increase our visibility, reach, and impact. Now, the stuff that we talk about on the show is part of our research-based strategic leadership pathway roadmap that we also teach in our TowerScope Leadership Academy, a private coaching and learning community for socially conscious leaders in healthcare, academia, STEM, and tech industries looking to make a greater impact. So to learn more and apply, remember, by July 15th, 19th, I think, actually, check us out at www.gotowerscope.com and click on Leadership Academy and come to our open house on the 15th. Remember to look out for applications. And thank you to talkradio.nyc for hosting. I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, your host of the Hard Skills Show. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Ernest Wayde. Great to have you.
Thanks,
and have a great rest of your day wherever you are all tuning in from. Thank you. Bye, all.